So it's 7:04. It's Thursday, January 6th. This is a meeting of the Fiber Broadband Completion Task Force. And I'm Mark Howell, the chair, and I'll do a quick roll call. Gordon Brockway.
Present.
Scott Hopkinson.
Present, if you can hear me. Yep.
We can hear you. David Hessel.
Present. And
Gail Heyer.
Present.
And I know that Joan Denberger is joining us as well. We can ask for a volunteer clerk and then dive right into the minutes.
Okay, you want me to do it again? I'm
You're
kind of on a roll here.
Man, Scott. We're assuming that everybody's ready to go. We have two sets of minutes that have been distributed this week. Both are December 9th minutes, for which David Hessel was the clerk, and last week's minutes on December 30th, for which Scott was the clerk. So if everyone feels ready, I'd be happy to discuss approving the December 9th minutes first. Let's take them in order.
I think I had the wrong date on mine, by the way.
Yeah, so you had mentioned that when you sent them out that you wanted to correct the date. Other than that, at least I didn't see anything.
Gail had some notes. Gail sent me some notes and little correction.
Okay. And the spacing's a little funny, and I don't mind fixing that.
I'm sorry, I do it in pages. I don't have words, so that's a converter problem.
Okay.
Gail, you want to? Gail, I don't mark up. I mean, I got your corrections, but Mark will have to mark those up, because if I mark it up on pages, it just further messes up when I export them to Excel. I'm into Word rather.
Yeah, well, I can. I think I could just talk through it. It's just one comment at the top of page. Top of page 2.
Yeah.
Where it says Gail. The way it reads right now is Gail reminded us that Article 41, our charge is to make broadband available to everyone, period. Thanks. Yeah. And so what I said as a comment, and I think this more actually reflects what I said, if not what I intended, but Gail reminded us that Article 41, our charge is to find out what it would take, and then in parentheses, I just wanted to quote the charge, study and recommend appropriate solutions, close quote, close paren, to make broadband available to everyone. So to find out what it would take, and then parentheses, and then quote, study and recommend appropriate solutions. Close quote, close paren, to make broadband available. And like I said, that quote is from the charge.
Okay, great. Actually, I guess our charge is a different print. Okay.
There's
Anything
one
else?
other edit that should be made, Mark, and that's at the top.
Yeah.
And that is public attendees. There was a fourth public attendee, and I could not hear who that person was when I went back and listened to the video.
Okay. I don't think we're.
Yeah, I don't think we need
required to.
Actually, my notes said that Carlin was there.
Oh, that could.
Okay.
But I mean, there was one meeting where she left early. Actually, this is a meeting where she did make a comment at the end, I think.
I'm just going back to see
no, maybe not. I don't know. No, I'm looking at that. I'm sorry. That's not a meeting where she spoke at the end.
Yeah.
But my notes did say she was there in the beginning.
Okay.
It matters.
You know what? How about this?
Yeah, there you go.
You could just strike all of them, frankly, because we don't have I don't think it's required that we capture them.
No, it isn't.
Okay.
So if people are more comfortable, we could just eliminate that.
I
I
don't mind
think
keeping it.
You know,
Even if it's not
so if we say included, it's
Yeah, that's
kind of,
fine.
you know, that means if somebody else was there and they didn't, if they don't make any comment. Is Hartman two N's, by the way? Sorry, for some reason that looks strange.
No,
I can double check it, but
I'm checking it now.
but her email shows just one N.
yeah, I think that's right. Okay. So,
Shall I move that we
Hold on.
accept those minutes as modified?
please do.
I
Second,
move, I there so move.
Okay.
I'll second.
Scott and Gail, any further discussion? I'll take a roll call vote. Gordon Brockway,
I,
Scott Hopkinson,
Aye.
David Hessel,
Aye.
Gail Heyer,
Aye.
and myself, Mark Howell. Aye. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And you know what I'll do? Let me save this before I, just in case. Oops. I'm going to stop sharing and save it. Okay. And I'll do a little bit of spacing,
Mark,
but
I'm sorry, I don't have words. I do very
no
little.
worries.
Work, yeah,
Yep.
You're one of those Apple folks.
I am. Be careful, I'll put my headphones on next.
Okay, let's take a look at, so having dealt with December 9, we have the minutes that Scott was able to create for December 30th.
Would you like me to present Gail's comments? She's the only one I got comments
Sure,
from.
that would be great. I had one or two little things, but if you want to put those on the screen, she may have caught the same things I did. They were basically typos.
Oh, yeah. Hold on a minute. Let me make sure I select the right window. I've got a zillion windows open here.
Okay.
Scott, did you use that Otter IO or did you just watch the video? I'm just curious.
Neither. I type it right while we do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's the right one.
I have it on my computer so I can compare. If it looks different, I'll let you know.
Mm,
Okay, that's the ones we just looked at.
Oh yeah, that's October. Looks like October
Or
7th.
Sorry, hold on. Let me try again. Unfortunately,
I usually find that if I find the window, make
There
it
it is.
active, and then go back to screen sharing, it's usually the first window in the list. So
I think that's it there.
yeah, that looks right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's got Gail Heyer edits in it. So, so I think her edits are as shown here. And item 3 in the agenda, chair's report. Gail added the pandemic relief is expected to help with the conduit installation in business districts for 24 through
Can you
26.
scroll down to where that's on the screen?
Is that not showing on the screen? I've scrolled on.
I'm seeing
Yeah, we're
it's
just seeing
a
part of
roll
the
call
first
vote.
page.
What is going on here? I apologize.
There, that's
Or,
it.
sure. Okay.
Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know why. It's just got some light time. I didn't do anything different.
Yeah, and I would add, I'm certainly fine with that. I would add just in the line immediately below that, Cummings is spelled Cummings.
Like that?
I'm not seeing the change reflected on the screen.
big delay.
Okay.
Right.
We need-
CUMMINGS.
Yeah,
That's what all right. Let's just move on.
sure.
Then the top of page 3. Gail added, there appears to be simply be an assumption that installations will happen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Edit?
Yeah, it's not showing up. We're
It's
still
weirdest
looking at
thing.
the top of page 2.
I'm going to just stop it and start it again.
Mhm.
God, I spend my day on Zoom. You'd think, except for it's different machines. So
Mm. Yeah, at the moment, I'm just seeing the same top of page 2
Yeah,
without updating. There, something changed.
There
Now,
we go.
now we're at the top of page 3. Okay.
okay, I don't know what to do. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
My machine is probably a little slower, unfortunately.
seems to be working.
Oh, it says it's paused.
Never seen that.
Yeah, I've never seen it before myself.
Probably a communication glitch.
It's probably because I have Concord Broadband. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, there we go. Are we there? Do you see it?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
let's scroll down, look for the next one.
Okay,
So can you
just
see?
before you get there, you see where it says on Losbrook Street? Right in the middle of the screen?
Yep,
It's Losbrook Road. It just is the correct name of the street. Okay.
got it fixed. And then the next one I have is the middle of page 3. This task force may take its own make our own suggestion about spending. This came from Gail.
Mhm. Right.
And then further down, so this is now the top of page 4. Gail discussed kind of marketing, and then in parentheses, such as campaign to get more installs on streets where fiber exists in volume versus year. Mark suggested that it would be helpful to understand the statistics, timing of what happens from the point of potential customer incoming inquiry about broadband to successful installation.
Okay.
Are you seeing me scroll down now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Gail commented that eminent domain can only be used for public good. Next one was so that customers need to go through multiple contractors to obtain service.
Yeah, need not go through.
Need not, excuse me.
No, but you have it. You have
It's
It's in-
correct there.
You
Yeah.
did it correctly. I
properly,
just
so I
didn't.
just want to make sure
Yep.
if someone wasn't reading them.
And then there was a typo there, another typo there. David thinks,
Okay, right, could you stop right there?
sure.
David thinks.
Yep.
Where it says the board does not approve any expense, I understand what you're saying there, but it could be interpreted incorrectly. Excuse me.
Should this say based on the survey?
No, the statement, the board does approve expenses. The correct phrase should be, the board approves expenses based on annual budget considerations and needs for the association.
Mhm.
How's that?
Okay. I
That's
think
my-
change approved to approves. Just
Yeah.
would be,
Board approves. It would be approves, not approved.
there you go.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, I like the rephrasing on that. So you definitely picked up the things that I noticed. Okay,
And I don't know if we need to change the wording, but it sounded like, so I said that I used the word eminent domain above.
Yep.
But the idea was that, okay, so the bylaws work in a particular way. But the bylaws don't bind the town, right? So the fact that there's like something in the bylaws that say that not one person can have broadband unless everybody has broadband, doesn't mean that that would prevent some other arrangement or some other authority, say at the town level, to do it. I might use the word eminent domain because that's an example of an authority. I'm just
Oh,
saying that
example
there
of-
may be some legal frameworks aside from just the bylaws of the see what I mean? I'm just trying to broaden it out, and at the same time don't want to invite any kind of you know, look, I'm just saying there could be more than one way to look at this.
Yeah, so you're thinking like there could be like a town level authority that maybe preempts, I don't know if you want to say that,
Exactly.
but I guess it
So
kind of
that-
does.
Yeah, there is a log jam or something that's right, that prisoners to, whatever, a barrier to decision making that affects how the board of a condo can act.
Mhm.
But they are not acting completely in a vacuum. They're also in the context of the town and superseding law.
so if I'm following you correctly, Gordon, there's an example of something that might fall into this. In some communities, I think Cambridge is one that's considering it, where essentially they prohibit landlords from signing exclusive agreements with cable providers that would preclude their tenants from, getting service from anybody they wanted to get service from. So
That could be an example, yeah.
That's a local bylaw that they've I think they're
Preempted or
considering putting in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Do you like what I wrote there? Can you see it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Just make that squiggly under access go away. But it doesn't look misspelled to me either, so I don't know what happened.
What happens is I forced a carriage return and it doesn't like the fact that it's lowercase.
Oh, okay. How about if you did you do a shift carriage return?
No, I never tried that. I'll do that next time.
Okay, great.
And maybe just where it says bylaws do not bind the town, say condo bylaws do not bind the town,
Yeah.
just for avoidance of doubt.
Yeah, and this whole thing could be a legal dead end.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not asking for like, a huge raft of litigation or anything. But it could be a
Good.
solution.
Well, it's good to realize that there are ways around it, that it,
Mhm.
Possibly, yeah.
Lord knows we don't want to spend the time that we spend on up near my place here, where there access to a trailhead has cost the town more than our budget for broadband.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, nobody wants a situation like that.
Right.
yeah, you do have to be a little careful about what you try to implement.
Okay. Let me see if I'll scroll through and see if we see anything else obvious.
Yeah,
Um,
along the way, I assume that if anybody else had any edits or changes, they've asked for them at this point. Okay,
I think we're good. Mark, you want to ask for a motion to approve?
I do, I would.
You know what, there's a question mark there toward the end, Scott. I think it was Joan's comment, actually. Let's see. At the end, the last page, sorry, last page. Is it second to last page?
All right.
Where
Let me find it first.
yeah. Page 7. Right there, stop. So where I said survey did not explain question mark, because it said survey did not understand what broadband is. I thought explain might be the better term, because I thought that was an important point that, you know, there's some confusion about broadband.
Yeah,
Hold
so
on
this
for a
is,
second.
I would actually disagree with that because we've since seen the
Go ahead, Mark.
the survey, and David shared it, and it was pretty clear about what broadband services were
Yeah,
provided.
I think is one resident did not understand what broadband was. That was the
Okay.
comment in the open meeting.
okay. So maybe that looks like,
I'm just going to put only one of Concord Green response.
yeah. So I'm going to give Joan, and Joan, what we're looking at is your comment from last week's meeting. So if what you see on the screen doesn't reflect what you thought you said, you would certainly be welcome to weigh in here.
Thank you, Mark, very much. That is correct. It was the open meeting. I had mentioned one resident spoke up. She said she did not understand really what broadband was, but she also said that some of her neighbors did not either. Those are in my notes from the open meeting. So
Okay.
thank you. That kept.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's important because what we're really trying to capture here is what happened and what was said. And we of course understand that sometimes people are speaking their opinions. Sometimes they, you know, even at times, occasionally things are misquoted or misstated, but that is what happened. So
if we just clean that up a little bit, because it's still a little confusing. The survey did not explain what broadband, wait a minute, one resident did not understand what broadband was, it's a little confusing still.
Sorry, let me fix it.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
let's let Scott work for a moment and then we'll.
In the middle of this, I'm trying to answer my daughter's calls.
Okay, we'll try to get you off the hook pretty soon.
No, I got it. I dealt with it. I told her I'd call her back. But
Green is GREENE, just to make your life more complicated.
okay, so it's hard to tell that the strikeouts there, but it was between. Does that kind of work for folks?
One of the residents did not have a clear understanding. Understanding, also some of our neighbors. Yeah, it's fine. Because I'm gonna, because you've seen the survey, Scott, and I think the survey was pretty clear. And it also had the links as to what.
Yeah, no, I thought to me it was clear, but maybe someone that wasn't technically savvy. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's the thing that we struggle with a little bit is like, we might say, you know, oh, you know, I could say, well, set my IP address to XYZ
Right.
and maxx to blah, 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 and blah, 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 because I'm a network person, I'll understand that, but no one else
Right.
might, so.
Okay.
Okay. Let's get back to, are we ready to put this to bed?
Any other further comments, questions, or modifications from anyone? If not, we could take a motion now to approve the December 30th minutes for the broadband completion task.
I'll
force.
move we approve the minutes as edited for December
30th.
Thank you, December 30th.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Scott. And we'll take a vote now. Gordon Brockway,
Aye.
Scott Hopkinson,
Aye.
David Hessel,
Aye.
Gail Heyer,
Hi.
myself, Mark Howell, aye. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm just making the edits in the new minutes saying that we approve those and we're all set to
Great.
good.
Good. Thank you so much, Scott. That's really great work. So just on the chair's report side of things, we are scheduled to meet next week, which is January 13th. We will not meet on January 20th. I did watch the select board meeting this week. It appears that, special town meeting for the middle school is going to go ahead, although my understanding was, I believe there was going to be a meeting with the moderator yesterday. And has anybody actually heard anything more about that?
Yeah, I was in a meeting earlier today with for the PEG access, and our town communications director, Aaron Stevens, was involved. And as far as I know, the meeting is still going on.
Yeah.
And there's still, now, by the way, just as a FYI, if you don't go to town meeting and you attend virtually, you can't vote. However, there will be a special election that you can vote. So we will have a say either way as to whether or not we approve of the middle school.
Yeah, just picking up on that though, if an article to authorize the town to go ahead with the project fails at town meeting, then my understanding is the election doesn't really happen.
Oh yeah, it's probably an
so
and
it
gate.
has to
Yeah,
pass.
it's an and gate. Yeah.
Yeah, to in order to get to the other. But that said, my understanding is that they're planning to have at least 3 meeting rooms and figure out social distancing protocols, and most likely the indoor mask mandate is probably still going to be in effect. So we will not meet that on January 20th on the assumption that that's going forward. We know that David doesn't have availability on January 27th. So it's kind of up to the committee. We could, obviously, if everyone else is available, we could go ahead and meet, or we could just skip that week and go to February 3rd. I'd like a sense of the board on that.
So my comment would be that I'm in the midst of gathering up and doing my homework for section 2, and it's going to take my rate, unfortunately, is outside of these meetings is limited. So 2 weeks, the January 27th date is going, next week, and then the 27th would be fine with me.
Any other thoughts?
I'm fine with it.
I guess
Whatever anybody else wants.
I prefer if we could meet without David, just to kind of keep the ball rolling.
Mhm.
That would be my preference.
And Gordon said either way is fine with him. And David, do you have any objection to that?
No.
Okay.
And I have no objection to Gail's point. Yeah, I mean, the benefit of meeting would be it keeps the pressure up to move forward. Keeps it on the front plate burner, so to speak.
Yeah, the unfortunate impact of this is if we don't meet on the 27th, then we actually go 3 weeks without a meeting, because we're already not meeting on the 20th. Okay, so we'll hold that on the calendar. So expect invitations for that, and then we would continue to go. I'm going to push to yes.
I'm sorry, my apologies. And then the 3rd of February is the next meeting?
Yeah, 3rd and then 10.
Okay, I'm still out of town, but I think I'll be able to log, join you. I'm in California then, but I should be able to get in on with you in California.
Be a nice afternoon meeting for you.
I'm sorry?
It'll be an afternoon meeting for you.
Yes, well, yeah.
Okay, great. A couple other quick things from a chair's report perspective. the select board is planning a focused meeting on January 31st, which will discuss ARPA funds. And so I think that we may have an interest in that.
ARPA funds?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the American Recovery Plan.
Oh, okay, the recovery plan, okay.
Pandemic relief funding, for which, broadband expenses were one of the things. I believe that the previous town manager and the light plan had included in their capital plan some expectation that they might try to use the broadband portion of that for enhancing availability in, say, the business districts and so forth. So
Yeah, I think I heard in another meeting that Sudbury received an $89,000 funding from one of these programs already, so.
Right. So it's probably worth finding out more about that. And I just thought it would, and I'm not even sure what day of the week the 31st is. I guess it's a Monday. So I think it's in lieu of their regular meeting. It'll of course be recorded, but anybody that wants to participate is encouraged. I'll try to get to that and at least read out on it. We could, if anybody's so inclined, have a discussion about what we know about ARPA, or even try and see whether there are any particular positions that we think should be taken. This is some of the time-sensitive nature that was called out in Article 41. Obviously, when there's funding available, those that are ready to make proposals tend to get it. Also coming up this Saturday is just, there's a town meeting preview. Now this is for the town meeting that will be held in May. Again, it's an opportunity to understand what might be coming forward. There's nothing particularly, we're not planning to propose any articles, but it's always good to keep an eye on what's going on. At this week's select board meeting, Carrie LaFleur was sworn in as interim town manager, and they had an interesting discussion about communications with boards and committees, and that's come up a little bit on this board. They highlighted a chart that basically tries to discuss what the situations are for boards and committees. The select board communicating with staff, boards and committees that have a staff liaison, or as in our case, a board that doesn't have a staff liaison, and residents to staff. And so this has come up in a couple of committees about requesting information. I know we've been cautious about making requests through the chair, and so far we've been normal, but haven't had any issues, but I think it's also worthwhile to.
I should make a quick mention here that I have had a couple conversations with Matt Cummings on financial things, pretty informally, but I just want to be upfront and above board on that. He actually steered me to some financial statements that were actually available on the web dating back to 2010. But I just want to make sure that we're clear that I had a few communications on that front.
Yeah, I'm going to try and I guess put this on the screen. So let's see if I can get it. I grabbed a screenshot, so you guys can tell me whether this is legible or too small or whatever. Let's see. So this was the table that they were working on, and the highlighted area is how the select board might interact. But there's probably two things that in my view at least, represented a codification of what's been normal practice up until recently, when I think there was maybe some misinformation about what could or could not be done. Can everybody read this well enough?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So our quadrant would be this lower left-hand quadrant. So boards and committees We're making requests to staff where no liaison. It says requests for information should be routed through the town manager's office until a liaison has been assigned. And there was some discussion, about the possibility of assigning liaisons to boards, including, making sure that everybody had one. And Carrie LaFleur seemed to be encouraging that route, which I think would actually help this out a lot, because it would be nice to sort of know who we go to. And, the town clerk's office and the senior administrative assistant, which is currently Chris Comedy, but was Jeremy Romerold, who's the person that I've been dealing with over Zoom and so forth, is available for those kinds of things, the bookkeeping. And probably contrasting that with the staff representatives is if there's a staff liaison and requests, just normally and makes sense, go through that staff liaison. And of course, carrying out the business, if you ask for substantive work, the liaison would discuss it with their supervisor. And the town, most importantly, this notion that the town manager does not need to be involved in the normal course of work. And I think for completeness, the lower right-hand corner, if you're, a resident, just, you want to know something about the town, the normal practice is you ask whoever you think you might know at the town. And if that town staff person doesn't know, they usually offer to help you find out from someplace else. And there's no expectation that residents is just asking for information from the town would ever be denied that information or not get a response. And so I thought this was very sensible, and I just thought it was really nice to see it on paper.
So, Mark, is this for requests for any information? Because I know, like in the beginning, we had asked some folks at the we asked the GIS department for some stuff, and then I can't remember, but is that for any and all requests? Or is it like town manager specific?
It's typically for the idea, the place that came down was if you're looking for information, you can certainly ask if the information is available and where you might find it. And if that information needs to be developed by somebody, then who might do that. And that kind of falls into the normal run. This is really about this notion, it's kind of captured here in the select board should not direct staff or assign work. So what they're trying to do is avoid having committees create work that staff members, feel obligated to do, and sort of codify how that is going. So I think the short answer to your question is yes. When we ask for information, it's important to make sure that the supervisors or the appropriate staff people understand what's being asked for, that it's being asked for by a committee. And so the idea is that if you're not sure and you don't have a staff liaison already, then you can route it through the town manager's office to, sort of ensure that that is logged and kind of approved to go forward. And that's the position that we're in right now. Okay.
So Mark, can you, just to clarify, I'm trying to make notes here. In the case of going to the town manager and being logged, what would be the criteria?
So requests for information should be routed through the town manager's office until the liaison has been assigned. So my question, and I'm thinking that we probably want to do this, is go ahead and say, okay, well, should we have a liaison? In other words, should there be somebody, a logical person would be somebody in the light plant or Greg Marcinek. I mean, we kind of have a path in one sense right now, since Gordon's a member of the light board. We could always, tell the light board that we want something, and then the light board, whose liaison is actually the light plant director, could ask for it. But that's obviously kind of roundabout and takes a long time. So having a specific person assigned, and many of the, bigger, let's say, planning board and so forth do have regular staff members, and this is why they do. That's one of the reasons why they do.
Okay.
And it's a little tricky because we're a task force, so but but I thought it was,
Yeah, to be honest with you, I kind of took my tactic as being as if I was an individual
yeah,
asking for information. I actually leveraged some work that Carlin Reed had done in the past that she'd shared with me that was done basically under the, I want to use freedom of information, but there's a different terminology for it, but that's basically what it's, there's a data request and there's a whole web page and describes how to do it here in the town.
common sense has prevailed in this in the past, and then every once in a while it, you know, it bubbles up or somebody gets, you know, unreasonable. And by unreasonable, I mean either unreasonable levels of requests are made, or sometimes unreasonable responses to perfectly ordinary requests are made, and then it needs to be done. But I thought it was worth covering, since, you know, we may find ourselves in this situation again. And one clear approach could be to just simply ask for a staff liaison, and that would help us at least get into the mode where we know where to send the requests. Doesn't mean everything gets done, but that's okay. So any further discussion about that? Now, yeah, I just made a note. Oh, there's senior admin in the town manager's office is probably going to be brought on board within the next couple of weeks. So that should help with the staffing and some of this. There's a chair's breakfast on the 19th. So I'll be considering what we will say to that. I'll probably have a draft of what I might say next week. And the annual town report, which is a book that gets published every year and covers the activities of the various boards and committees. I received an email from Aaron Stevens in the last, I guess in late December, with the deadlines. The write-up is due, I saw 2 dates in there, but the later was January 21st. The earlier is January 14th, but it would be an opportunity to sort of at least, hopefully will only appear in one and only one ever annual town report, but maybe not, because we're kind of spanning 2 years. It's a calendar year oriented thing, but I think we might just say the purpose of the committee and where we were headed.
By the way, it might be useful from, I can share, we have a draft for the PEG town report that we just did. And it's pretty high level summary. It's 2 pages and it's very, you know, if you would like, Mark, I can send it to the committee here, the one that we have as a draft for the PEG, just to give people a sense of what it looks like.
That'd be great. Basically, it's usually, you know, what's the mission of the committee, who's on it, and what significant activities occurred during the year. And so it ends up in the library, so enshrined forever.
And by the way, the pay committee has gone out of its way, even in virtual world, to take pictures of the pay committee in order to include in the report. So we do a Zoom screenshot.
Yeah, something like that. I was gonna let us off the hook on the picture part of it, but
just FYI. Okay,
yeah.
I will take an action to send that around just so people can have a reference there.
Great. So those were the couple of things that I had for a chair's report. Any old business? Anybody have anything they want to report or read out on tonight?
I have a couple items that are not necessarily old business, but worth possibly mentioning if I just can find my notes. The first one, which is kind of interesting, again, it happened today, Vince Carlson, and in our discussion, obviously the PEG Access Committee cares. One thing they care about is the fact that we receive a franchise fee from Comcast for the because they're in town, and the PEG Access Group cares a bit about that, and as well as the operation of the broadband of the Minuteman Media Network. And one of the things that came up, and I will have to follow up with this group about, is that apparently the folks on that committee were savvy enough to notice that there is a threshold at which if our broadband gets above a certain level, we are forced to participate in the franchise fee that the Comcast pays dearly for, which funds our PEG access television and a number of permanent staff on the town. And so the threshold as described to me today was 30%. And we are potentially near that, given that the Comcast has a roughly just under 5,000. And I think our subscription is 1,500, 1,800. I can't remember the last number I heard. So I just wanted to mention that, and I'll report back to the committee if I find out more information about that, if it has any impact on our modeling and our finances.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
And
I thought it was extremely interesting. Like I said, I'll report back.
That's something I had speculated about earlier on, but I would question whether or not a calculation like that should be based on only the broadband piece.
Yeah, I don't know if it's cable television or broadband. Again, we might have to get one of our lawyers involved. Carlin would probably be the perfect person to tell us about that. But it came up, and I just wanted to put it on people's radar. That's all. And I'll
Thank you
follow
for
up.
that.
Yeah.
Good to know.
And then the other comment that I had was I had, and I already mentioned it, but I just want to reiterate, I had talked to Matt, and he had pointed me towards the financial reports that are available from 2010 on for the light plant, which include the broadband. And so that will allow me to harden up the model that we have and potentially evaluate any of these, like how we would deal with homeowners associations or isolated groups of people that would want to subscribe. So I'll continue to work on that.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, I was not aware of the threshold around the franchise fee. I mean, it's an issue for the operating budget, but I kind of agree with Gordon. I'm a little skeptical because the franchise fee always was sort of a broadcast TV thing. And the broadband business, the CMLP's offering doesn't even include that. So
Yeah, the dollars amounts, the broadcast service is so expensive and so valuable compared to the
Yeah.
yeah.
The other thing I got, by the way, is a side effect of the PEG is someone had shared a redacted copy of the Comcast fees and charges. If anyone's interested, I can forward that as well, which gives you a sense. I know that we have David Allen mentioned the other day that their household spent upwards of $300, and I was interested to find out where those numbers came from. And so we have a redacted bill from our summary of services offered from Comcast, if people would be interested in knowing about that.
Yeah, well, I'd be interested just because I think that there's always, anyway, people don't all pay the same price for this service.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I mean,
well, obviously the internet's.
I haven't done it recently, but every few years I'll get really worked up about my cable bill and give them a call. And they say, oh, well, you just happen to be calling at the right time. We've got a special we're running.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course they do that.
But that has a number of times pushed my bill below $200. Now it's been some time since I've had that call with them, but
it somehow manages to sneak back up again.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share momentarily the screen. This give you a sense of what I got a hold of. It's obviously you can see it's been redacted. It's relatively recent. It's December. It shows you the current and new billing, everything from broadcast television to all the different services, the internet, so forth and so on.
Yeah, I think that the kinds of specials that I'm talking about would be layered on top of this, or in a sense subtractive on top of that.
Scott, what I noticed about that though is that the franchise is under the Xfinity TV piece.
Yeah, and I could ask Carlin. I know she would know right off the top of her head I think that's true, that it's tied to the notion of cable television and television broadcast. So
Right. And, you know, which is not the service that's being.
correct. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I did take some time this week to listen to Gordon's presentation to the light board, and he did talk about expanding services. So
Well,
we need to,
that's another, if, as and when that
Yeah,
were
just something
included.
we should-
I wasn't talking about getting into the TV business.
yeah,
was
but I
talking
mean,
about-
well, you were, yeah.
Yeah.
The point
No,
is
it-
that we need to keep our eye on that as well. So
Yeah.
that's-
Okay. Anyone else have anything from prior meetings or activities that they wanted to raise? If not, what I was hoping we would sort of spend the bulk of our time on today was we discussed at the last meeting the idea of sort of sectioning off this preliminary outline. And by the way, I know it was a little later than I hoped, but I did distribute in various document formats that that outline, so that hopefully in your editor of choice, Dave, I didn't do pages, but I could.
Okay. I can read it.
I'd be I sent a PDF out, so but I'd be happy to actually export it into pages and
No, when I open it, it opens in pages. That's okay.
great. So
And by the way, Mark,
especially-
I was able to create my own section 2 and from the RTF version, and I'm good
Great.
to go.
Good.
So,
So my hope was, and what I was thinking we might spend some time on here is, unless someone wants to jump into a different part of the document, I was actually thinking that we might spend some time on the recommendation section. And I'm not necessarily saying let's make our recommendations now, because I think that's that would be premature, but rather it would be an opportunity for us to sort of say, maybe flesh out what kinds of things and what sorts of things are going to be in the recommendation. So if you remember, the homework from last week was think about what recommendations could or should be being discussed, and then assuming that they are discussed, then we could go ahead and either maybe even assign out individual people to work on those recommendations. So does that?
yeah, that seems like fine. One
Sure.
thing that I would mention, and Gordon has the assignment for this, was Gordon mentioned that he was going to go back through the minutes and gather up all the ideas that we kind of put together through the course of all these wonderful minutes and meetings that we've had as part of his work for his section. And so I should think anything that we come up with today may be related to anything that we've said, stuff we said in the past. So I don't imagine Gordon has done that yet. So no. So we can do the brainstorming again, but it's likely to be redundant with what he finds by doing that archaeology work, so to speak. Yeah, I'm happy to go through, do some brainstorming on this front.
I'm kind of hoping that what you'll recognize is those things that are already captured, and if we missed anything, we can discuss the misses and what.
So
Some stuff. And just.
So thanks for that, Scott. And I think that we've really tossed around a lot of really great ideas.
Right. Yeah. I
so-
mean, that was kind of what my thought was. I would be surprised if we came up with a new idea now, but it's possible. Yeah.
Right.
The first part would be to
Well-
kind of catalog all those that we've already brainstormed on. But
Let me just offer this though, and I don't know if I've raised this issue before. I think I've tried to, but okay. So you went and saw my presentation, right? That 10-minute spiel that I gave to the light board, and one of the attendees said, "Hey, that's not what the town meeting actually asked you guys to even work on." In other words, I was very broad. So if we narrowed it down and said, and we were just talking about it in the minutes too, Gail was clarifying what the charge is. It's like, okay, what does it take to get to full implementation or whatever? So I actually
Yeah,
kind of like I kind of like the brainstorming and the fact that there's a whole bunch of things we can do to get towards that without necessarily actually trying to make up a number about how much it'll ultimately cost or actually create a plan for getting all these things done. It's more like if we can list these things, we can have the brainstorm. Mark, you were just talking a second ago about having like going to the part of the document where we talk about, some of those suggestions. That actually might be a more realistic goal for what our work product looks like, rather than having to say, okay, we've done the calculation, and if we're going to install it in every house throughout the town, it's going to cost $50 million. I mean, that would be awful. That would like kill the project. Nobody would want to do it. So it's more like iterative. How can we point in the right direction?
Right.
This is where we've been doing pretty good, but we can do better. And these are the things that you'll never actually solve if you don't actually put some attention into it. And you know what I mean? Make it more incremental.
Right.
Gordon, I will comment. I did listen to your recording early this morning, and I felt like what you described was more around the solution space, whereas a lot of our conversation was about understanding the problem. So again, we've talked about these three elements of our report, three elements of our work. What is the problem? What is the scope and nature of the problem? What will it cost to solve them? And what are the recommendations that we might have to pay for that cost? And I felt like your discussion in the light board was really more focused on the last of those three and less on the first, which was talking about what was the nature of those zones like Concord Green or Kais Road or roads that have underground utilities and so forth. And I just wanted to make that comment here, which is we need to very much put at the front of this thing, what is the problem statement and what is the cost to solve that problem, without recommending how to write the check.
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to solve. I mean, I have a problem with recommending that, for instance, we pay for what should be homeowners' piece.
Right. I
That's
mean,
yeah.
one way to look at the Concord Green problem, for example, is that the cost of install is $150 plus $453 or whatever the number that Concord Green. That when I read the survey for Concord Green, and they took the $100,000 and divided by the number of homes there, and they said it would add 153 or whatever the number, 400 and some odd dollars to the cost of the install. Well, fine, that's a number. Now there's someone else, we can make recommendations of how you can fund that, either by amortizing over the rate that's paid for that service or some other way, or the homeowner association pick it up. That's a separate question. The first one is,
all right.
Yeah, that's the way I kind of thought of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I honestly think that that's actually one of the biggest problems.
Well, this is a part that Mark's working on now, and I don't know that I can't say that I have a clear understanding. We have some percentage of the homes that aren't reachable currently. In other words, there's no passing fiber. And I know that we've talked a little bit, we have talked at some length about what that looks like in terms of unreachable places. And I know Mark's working on that section of the document, but to understand, one of the things that would be useful or interesting from my view perspective is if we could categorize them into, how many of them are homeowner association, Concord Green or Kais Road type program situations, how many of them are streets in which there's no fiber and the utilities are buried and there's no convenient way to get the fiber into the street.
Yep.
Do we have that kind of top level triage to understand where things are and what the cost for each of those categories is? I think that's something I'm, like I said, I think Mark's got that ownership at the moment and he probably hasn't done it yet. And
Well, yeah, I'm formatting it. What I am kind of trying to get at here is there's sort of a definition of what's done, and I touched on it last week when we were towards the end of the meeting, but if a piece of fiber goes past a premise, and if that premise happens to be a single family home today, and there's a line on that map that says that person, can connect to that fiber, we consider them served under today's policies and wouldn't take any further action. And yet there are these other locations where, really, when the fiber network was planned in the first place, lines were drawn on that map, and then when the realities of construction actually occurred, it simply wasn't done. And it wasn't done for some of the reasons that we discussed in our earlier meetings, the challenges of finding conduit or lack of access to conduit in the right of way and those things. And so they were left in some of those 50 different areas were left as unserved. And so one of our definitions could simply be that there is fiber at the right point in the right of way to enable a willing customer who happens to be on that property to get that. And by that definition, just to touch on what we always touch on, Concord Green would be considered served because there is fiber. It goes right past on Main Street and Baker Avenue, and there's a clear path to the premise. And if the owners choose not to do that, then and I'm really what I'm really
Under that definition.
Under that definition. Now,
Well,
I think most of us, certainly most of the people that have been come into this meeting, are not satisfied with that definition, and there's certainly you can find people around town who are dissatisfied with that definition. And what I'm looking for is, I think that we need to at least identify what the alternatives are for defining that a location is served or not served by the service, and then identify that as the gap. And that's kind of a logical definition rather than it almost comes before cost, because once you decide everybody that's not served, then you can start having a conversation about how do we figure out how much that would or would not cost to change.
So-
Mark, I think your example is a good one in the way you came at it, which was how do we, and this goes back to this three-party phenomena that we've talked about, which is there's someone between the end user and Concord Broadband, which is if there's, I think what I'd like to suggest to do this in a way that is more meaningful is to think about any scenario where there is either a gap in the connectivity with the fiber, or there's a third party. So that's two broad categories that we could easily identify quickly. Meaning Concord Green, there's a third party, the homeowners association, or Concord Green, Concord Kais Road, or some other situation, or Concord Housing Authority. By the way, that was a new one that came up today in the PEG access. Concord Housing Authority has some interest here. They're not represented, but a similar problem. If there's that third party, or if there's no access on the street. So there's two broad categories that we should probably bin all these problems into first. And then the second one is, how do we deal with these third party situations?
Yeah.
Yeah, my bet is that if you subtract out the third party situations, you'll basically get the those black ones that are on the border that have electricity from Eversource. But if it's not, then I think that would be a first item of first priority would be, look, there's no good reason why there's not fiber running down street X, Y, or Z. Let's just get that done.
Yeah, most of those 50 areas that we looked at in the meetings where we looked at the maps are not that third party situation.
So that would be a good thing for them to concentrate on.
They are roads like Partridge Lane or Phillip Farm Road, where the right of way goes by on one sort of main arterial, and there's no conduit under the road. There's a direct buried utility service or something. And so the last portion of the connection in the right of way is unavailable. Therefore, you can't leave the right of way and get into the property. So that's what's apparent from the GIS map. So there's a significant number of those.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that should be the first thing that we have in our report, which says, here are the two broad categories that we've discovered. One is the homeowners association or third party situation. And I think third party is a great way to name it, because then it represents homeowners associations and landlords. And then the streets that don't have fiber access due to buried power, no fiber access or fiber conduit. And then how much of each of those, and what, maybe we can even get to that discussion following through the cost of what it would take, each one of those. We might even use our friends at Concord Green's example, $100,000 to $200,000 to get it connected in the homeowners association, and they have to prove that, or we have to go over the top and help fund that.
Just for the sake of definition, because I've never liked the third party use. The HOA here, as I think you all understand, are all owners, and all are owners that are elected to be on the board. So we're not some third party.
Yeah, that's a
They
good
can
point.
vote against you, but
I'm
they can
sorry?
vote against you. They're not
Yeah, if they
necessarily
don't like what the
representing your
decision
interests.
we're making, we
So
can
it
be
is a
voted
third
off the
party.
board. So we're not some arm's length third party. We're all residents. And the requirement is you must be a resident, you must be a homeowner. We're not some abstract group of individuals who happen to be
Yeah,
on the
no,
board.
it's a good point, David. And the question is, for the purposes of our work, do we need to subdivide? Do we need to subdivide those two categories? So third
Yeah, I mean,
party
Well,
homeowners association
so
versus
take a different
third party's
example,
landlord. Yeah.
Take a
Right.
different example. When you have a landlord-tenant situation, you clearly have a property owner who is
Right.
not the person that lives there. And so in this definition, and you can see it on the screen, I'm defining third party as in between the service provider, which is CMLP.
Yep.
And the end customer,
Mhm.
who is, the per or subscriber. So that's in other words, somebody who has a say over that path. And I'll make, when I'm working on section 1, I'll do that. And what I'm saying is in the recommendations, we're going to need to decide, when we talk about something like a policy around universal access, how much enablement, what's the definition of complete there, if that, and, I think we obviously need to describe this situation to others who come later that will not want to spend as much time trying to figure this out, but then, essentially have a discussion about what position we feel it's appropriate to be taking on that, what process there is. So that's kind of where, I do agree with those two categories, and at the moment I would struggle to come up with a third category, so I won't.
Okay.
But if somebody comes up with one, and
Just to recap, I'm sorry, to make sure I understand this. You said the two categories were third party and then streets that don't have fiber access, and we're trying to subdivide that first one into two subcategories, one in which there's HOA that's duly elected representatives of the owners themselves, and the other scenario, it might be a landlord or someone that's truly a third party.
those are the two examples I can think of right off the bat. And so gaps in connections are where fiber is not able to enter a parcel directly from the right of way. In other words, and generally speaking, and there may be other cases, but this is, incomplete incomplete construction, based on the original design even. Usually.
Yep,
there's-
okay.
I don't
Yeah,
know if it would
I
be
do-
helpful.
There's the
Go
third
ahead, Gail.
category.
yeah,
The third
Um,
category is Concord Muse.
just a second, Gail.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this and it occurs to me that the gaps in connection, that's really like a physical barrier.
Mhm.
And then, letter B, their third party is maybe more of a legal barrier. So I don't know if it's helpful to think about it like that.
Mhm.
So, one of them is a physical construction, like the fiber isn't where as far as it needs to be, but then the third party is more of a, legal or I don't know, human interaction or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there in case that helps us come up with,
Yeah, and one might even say this is the definition of the unserved locations.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we're talking about. Is what are we're trying to create these bins that which we can categorize
Mhm.
the unserved locations, and we've got two major ones, and the first one has two subcategories, as I see
Yeah.
it. The third party situation, quote unquote, and the third party has two subcategories. One is there's an HOA, and another one is it's a landlord. Someone just mentioned Concord Muse. I would think that would fall under the landlord.
No, you're missing the point. And I mentioned it just a second ago.
Okay.
The places that are covered by Eversource, right? They're on the border. Originally on that GIS map, they were black. squares.
Yeah, those were the special case of the you're unable to enter from the right of way directly to the parcel, partially because you had to go outside of our territory. It's not impossible.
Okay, that's not a gap in connection. I mean, it's a different kind of gap in connection,
Yeah.
and it deserves its own enumeration. I think we need to add item number C.
I'm going to add it. Yeah, I'm going to add
Yeah.
properties that are served by entities. So let me say it this way and see if you like this. Properties that are served by power entities that are outside of Concord, meaning
Yeah.
adjacent towns or Eversource,
Yeah.
and we have no access in the right
Yeah.
way.
Although in Concord Muse's case, they are absolutely served electrically by CMLP. So that's not the reason that there's not fiber over there. They're inside the town. They're in the electric service territory. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about them at all, really.
So is that a fourth category? Say, whatever
Maybe.
reason it
I
has.
will. So let me be clear about the structure that I was envisioning for this document. This section would be taking a look at what recommendations we might have with respect to a policy that determines how much work is, and what sorts of efforts are going to be made on these. I will exhaustively go through these different kinds of cases in section 1 that talks about the map and what places can and can't be gotten to in the way that Scott was talking about. So by the time we get down to the recommendation section, what I'm encouraging us to do is think about the notion that we want to leave some guidance for whoever is doing governance and running this business to say, we really think that it's in the, it's appropriate or in the town's interest to either connect or not connect. And investments should be made in connecting those premises and residents that are in these situations or not. And that's the tough thing that we're being called on to do. And if we don't feel like we can make that decision on our own, then I think we have to try and point at who we do think should make that decision, whether that be town meeting or somebody else.
Well, I'm sure that each one of these categories has corresponding actions that need to be taken. They're not all cost.
Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
like, for instance, the third party thing is really, like Gail said, a legal log jam rather than a cost. I suppose you could say it's a cost if we were just willing to pay for their piece of it.
Right. That's the business model thing that we're talking about, which is if 20% of Concord Green would sign up, guaranteed 260, take that $100,000 cost would the broadband business be willing to plop that down
Yeah,
as a bet, you know?
yeah, that's worth talking about.
Right.
But the point, I think also the point is that how do we get here? Why is there even an issue that's worth having a town meeting warrant article that was approved? And I think part of the thing is that the status quo, the way that we were, prioritizing, wasn't ever going to actually get to the point where
Mhm.
Concord Broadband was actually going to really be in a place where it was ready to grapple with some of this stuff. So we're trying to show a way forward, and it's not just money; it's also a planning and resolve.
Yeah. So, and that kind of leads me to this next one. I think that we're going to end up needing to make some recommendations in the area of governance. In other words, somebody should be assuming that we can somehow agree or map out a course towards defining what needs to be done, then someone has to track that activity by way of governance. And so the questions there are the who, the what of that tracking. Who does the tracking and who are they tracking, and what's their authority to do that?
So like having some good metrics could help there.
Right.
And we don't have the metric. In fact, in a way, universal action, one definition is the first step, the first stab at generating some metrics that are badly needed and don't exist.
Right. Yeah. Okay. This is again. So the next policy that at least came to my mind was, okay, so we think there is some benefit in having a municipal broadband network, and is it possible that there are economic vitality benefits or sustainability or equity or inclusion benefits that also could be goals? And if so, how would those be developed or articulated? The idea of maintaining the tax base. We have lots of, a lot of communities have different kinds of policies that they implement through zoning or tax policy or whatever they do to try to encourage the economic activity in their community or support property values or so forth. So an interesting aspect of this could be around that. And so I'm just saying that came to mind. You guys could tell me, I don't think we should wade into these waters, or maybe you would suggest that this is something that should be thought about, or maybe somebody else should be thinking about.
I'm going to suggest, and so my thought is, if we think about the Article 41 and the goal, and Gail, I'm surprised you're not saying this before me, but it was pretty, maybe we should stick to the narrower focus of availability of Concord broadband to all of the, all the residents of Concord. Whether or not, it's not really to answer the question of whether it's good or not, or whether there's a benefit or blah, blah, blah. Let's just focus on that question, which is how do we give Concord broadband availability to everyone who lives in town, right?
Well, I agree that in the broadest sense, if we can just give everybody access to it, it's going to benefit everybody. So tallying up who is hurt the most by the gaps that we've identified above won't matter once we get it to everybody. In the meantime, if we don't have it, those gaps may be hurting some more than others. And that could generate some interest in political motivation, political support, or opinion, or whatever that would favor a more aggressive support. Anyway, so I mean, this is sort of the opportunity for selling the idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is, I don't know if I want to call it extra, but like Gordon said, it's a little bit, this is how you sell whatever recommendations you have, and it's really support for the work that we're doing or that we're recommending. And it, I think when in the town meeting materials that I came up with like a 1-pager more about the article, I put some of those reasons in there. It's really, yeah, I mean, it's really like support. So I don't know. I mean, it's an important part of what we're doing here, and I do like the idea of being aware of, maybe how am I trying to say, like, we focus on single family homes, and those are like, the wealthiest part of the town, and so and who ends up getting served, and that's not equitable. So we need to be aware of those things, but I don't know, I'm not sure where to put that.
Neither am I. And the reason, so I really wanted to sort of precipitate this discussion because I think that it helps us sort of define where we're going. So I'm just capturing the question that I heard you guys asking, which is this really an area that's just additional benefits that might accrue from successfully doing successfully completing the primary mission?
Yeah. And I think that clearly the universal access analysis and maybe the governance are clearly within the mandate. This supports the mandate, but I don't think is clearly called for.
And we haven't gotten down there, but towards the bottom of this, I'll scroll down a little bit so you can see it, is this notion of, is there some additional follow-on work? So are there things that we might say someone should look at this? Maybe it should be in somebody's portfolio, but we may or may not have time to address this based on what we're trying to accomplish. This next one touched on the notion of, should there be a policy around rate of return, which is really another way of turning around the question that around the finances, which is saying you can do a lot of things. You can make investments in getting to hard or harder to reach places if you set up the financial guardrails that say, as long as your business is operating with this amount of free cash or something like that, go ahead and do some of these things. If it's not, then maybe you don't. So how might that guide investments? Or does that seem like something that we might want to approach?
Yep.
I think that's a little. I think again, trying to connect it to the warrant article. I think it's a little bit further away from what we were asked to do, but I think that if we had something similar to like the undergrounding fund that the light plant does, that is, you're taking some money, you're taking some of that profit, you're setting aside to use for actually expanding or investing, growing, maybe dealing with the third-party problems or whatever. This is money that's sort of like reserved, and it's not really going to necessarily, it's not really available to be paid back to the town as a dividend. So in other words, there's some value in trying to push back preemptively against the idea that this thing should just be operated in order to maximize profit.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's actually that may be part of the sort of summary overarching recommendation, which is the model we tried to build was one originally that, we were so focused on not auguring into the ground and creating a big crater in the ground financially. But we're now at a point, hopefully we're now at a point where we can say this, we can take this investment, it's making money, it generates a certain amount of free cash, and we can use that to extend its reach. And here's now we can step back. This is a mid-game play that we talked about even during town meeting, which is we've surveyed where we're not reaching and how can we reach those, and this is the cost, and we should go after those as we have money.
Yeah. The light plant also generates a dividend, and it is regulated by the DOER, and it can't be higher than something like 5 or 8% or something like that. But we don't have a similar. We don't have the DOER. Doesn't of course fly here, and we could generate any level of profit. And I don't think it's really up to this committee to sort that out.
Nope.
That's something the light board does. But here's the thing is that if, let's say that we get to the mid game or maybe a little bit further, the business is doing well, it's stable, it's got a stable subscription base, and those broadband subscription fees that we pay to the ISPs are coming down over time, then hey, maybe we should be lowering prices.
Yeah.
And now there's a conflict between the interest of the subscriber and the interest of the town, which wants to collect that
Right.
nice annual dividend.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't think we can sort that out, but it doesn't hurt to point it out.
Right.
That
And
this is
that's
something
where
that we need to actually make an explicit decision about as a town.
Yeah, I by the way, Gordon, just as anecdotally, the peering costs are going down, but it's such a small component of what we charge. I don't think it's almost a rounding error.
Well, the other one would be the virtuous circle that you do talk about.
No, I
Right.
would definitely agree around that one. That's going to be meaningful.
Okay,
But the cost savings of broadband charges from the suppliers going down will translate into less than $1 per subscriber across our town over the next few years, is my prediction.
Okay, but you
So
get
it's not
the broader
it's not going to
point.
move the needle. The virtuous circle definitely will move the needle.
Okay, but you get, I wasn't really, I just threw that out as an example. You get the
Okay.
point that there could
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah,
cost benefits. And if we're not proactive, one party could grab them and claim them as their own. And maybe the benefit of those cost decreases actually belong with the subscribers. They won't go to the subscribers unless that's part of the culture, part of the
Yeah.
decision making.
Yeah, I
know
I
mentioned it a
think
couple
we
of
would.
times before that, the fact that included in the budget for broadband was payment in lieu of franchise was the beginning of some, let's call it discretionary choice about, placing an expense on broadband that doesn't have anything to do with broadband really, notwithstanding the discussion about whether or not it, somehow that, because that's going to fund Minuteman Media Network. And I mean, we all like Minuteman Media Network. You wouldn't be watching this on a recording if it weren't for them, but who decided that broadband pays for that rather than trash collection or water and sewer?
Yeah, I mean, I think this definitely is an area where we could make a recommendation, and I can say my recommendation would be, until the network is completed such that, every person who wants broadband can get it, that the excess profits or some, level of return needs to go into expansion of the network.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I think it'd be
interesting.
helpful to make a recommendation along those
that-
lines so that,
Is it-
anyway, that's my.
Yeah, and that does fall within the article, because that would be a recommendation that we could make that would help support and maximize growth.
Yeah.
Is
And I
it,
mean, that also goes to the policy for retained earnings, which I know comes up, like, for example, how much do you need to reserve for the big storm that comes and wipes out a bunch of the network? Like, what are those cash policies and and so forth. And it goes right to that as well.
I have a crystal question. Is it fair to assume, let's just take, I think it's 66 or 6,800 people who can currently get broadband,
Mhm.
and we have a remaining that can't.
Mhm.
Is it fair to assume from an economic standpoint that each incremental person that we have to bring online, using that as a kind of a generic phrase, each one will become more expensive, or will that be a flat fixed cost for each incremental one we have the potential to bring online?
So, David, the model says they're more expensive for about a year and a half or 2 years, and then they're less expensive. Because during that year and a half or 2 years, remember that curve we kept,
Yeah.
that we're paying off the difference between the 150 they pay and the 1,200 to 1,500 or 1,000 that it costs to actually do the install.
So it's assumed that,
Once that we paid that down, then they're less expensive. But in the meanwhile, we're just servicing that debt.
Well, let me answer the question a slightly different way.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a step function. So there's a certain amount of infrastructure that's in place, and that infrastructure, you build the bridge, and it's a 3-lane bridge, and it can handle 55,000 cars a day or whatever. And then so each car up to that first 55,000 doesn't cost you that much.
right,
Incrementally, and you could argue that as you approach that number, they're sort of on a unit cost getting cheaper. But then all of a sudden, your traffic goes up to 100,000 a day, and you don't have enough, so you have to make another investment, and that
Right.
might cost, and then it goes down. So it's kind of it's a little bit of a step function. But we clearly, the size of the business has gone past that first step, and investments have been made for a second step, which has a capacity up to a given number of subscribers. When I last worked on it, I felt like we could handle about 2,500 subscribers without having to make any particularly big other investment, and then it would probably cost more again. But generally speaking, the marginal cost of a new subscriber is going down over time.
so, but let me just so I understand, is the marginal cost of a new subscriber one that already has, well, obviously that marginal cost of the new subscriber is one that already has a service in front of his
Yes,
house or her house.
right.
So,
Yes.
but the cost of a subscriber who doesn't have the service is a
Is
whole
higher.
different cost structure.
Is higher, yes.
Yes, that's the question I have, and that's,
Yeah.
so a road, let's just say, Maple
Mm-hmm.
Avenue, who may not have service, that has 30 houses,
Yeah.
that's a very expensive cost.
In simple terms, that's true. Although, if you looked at some of the more recent subdivisions, like what do they call it, Black Horse Ridge, the one over by the Thoreau Club.
Yep.
So they built the fiber conduit, they built conduit into all of those, new promises and installed them. And so the marginal cost of getting them from the light plant's perspective was actually almost trivial, because, it was just the cost of running fiber up there, because
Yep.
that builder made all those investments when they
Okay.
were building. So as opposed to if you really have to go dig up Partridge Lane and lay down a bunch of, conduit and stuff like that, then that's going to be more. So the answer is it depends a bit
Okay,
on, but assuming that somebody has to make that investment, it's just a question of who made it. And that,
Okay.
that brings us back to
okay, much like here at Concord Green,
Yeah.
who's gonna make
Yeah,
the investment?
And at some point, I guess it's like a timing thing. It sounds like such a big deal, like, oh, it's so expensive to get the fiber into Partridge Lane, but I mean, it was expensive to get it onto my street, so it's just, and it's like these little pieces of it, of investments that need to be made. And once those are made, then going forward, it's more of an even cost. I don't know how
Yeah.
to say that, but
No, I get it, but
Yeah.
we reference Concord Green a lot, and we've been saying 100,000. The reality is, it's, at least by our current estimates, if we laid the conduit
Mhm.
at the rate we think we would have to lay, it's more like 300,000.
Right.
So that's a whole different number that,
Yeah.
we look at.
Right.
And,
And
you know,
according
and
to-
that's an investment that's good for 50 years in the ground too. So
Right.
you look at it and you say, yes, it's a big nut, but it, once done, somebody gets to ride on that for a long
Right.
time.
I have to say I'm a little pessimistic or that if we've been doing the easiest ones first, that to complete the project, we'll have to tackle some more difficult challenges.
Yeah.
For instance, and anyway, we've been talking about them, but
Well-
it could also be in parts of town where instead of having 100-foot frontages, there are 1,000-foot frontages. And
Yeah.
whatever. So in that respect, the cost may hook up.
Okay.
So I'm noticing that it's 8:40 and we've been going about an hour and 40 minutes. So that's about our typical amount of time, even though we started late. But I do think I sense, based on Gordon's comment, that we were about to shift gears, because there is this question of what should be the objectives to get that, get those subscribers up on the so-called easy ones, or the ones that have a better business return, because that could support, other goals in some of these others. And that would be a good place to talk about, how far into those waters should we or should we not be going, or should we just be pointing the way to say, these are ways to get at this, and again, so that's kind of where I think that this is the tougher part of what we need to do, which is.
So
which
I have
is
that,
sort of
I have a pretty
come up with a
clear
road-
recommendation on that. Again, I'd like to parse this down in the three different ways we've talked about it. First is, let's just categorize those areas that are underserved. Second part, what does it cost to serve each of those types? And if we can bin them, and we've already talked about binning them today into the two broad categories, which are the third-party situation,
Yeah.
the streets that don't have fiber access, and then potentially properties that are serviced by entities other than Concord Light Plant and have no right-of-way access. So there's that third possibility exists.
Yeah.
And then the third part of our recommendation or report should say, here are ways that you might fund that. One might be the circle of growth we've talked about. One might be, keep the rates higher. One might be, and then again, there might be other recommendations we have. Just here are the metrics you should be watching, and so forth.
Yeah, all three of these next sort of subsections have the word process in the title. So a process for setting strategic planning goals, a process for budgeting it, a process for planning the capital expenses. And that's, I think, comes down to what Scott, you just said, was the process. You got to quantify the costs. You have to think about how to pay for those costs, and then figuring out when it's worth it to do it. And that's all. So while we could try to put pencil to paper to compute these things and say, these are the ones you should do, I think there's also some value in considering whether our recommendation really is, here's the process, here's where those responsibilities should lie on an ongoing basis to make these decisions guided by policy. So I'd like to sort of offer that up as some food for thought. I'm going to say that we're kind of reaching the witching hour here. So I'll open up briefly for public comment if there is some, and then we might bring this meeting to a close unless there's objections from the committee.
No objection on my part.
No objection.
None.
All right. Well, seeing Pam's hand up and knowing how patient you've been, Pamela. So I apologize for ignoring your hand before, but I really felt like it was we needed to work through that. But please offer your comment.
That's okay. Thank you. I appreciate that you did dig down to categorize the unserved groups, because the fact that, yes, indeed, there is fiber in Concord Green, it still means that the individual customers there that might want it cannot get it, no matter what they would be willing to pay for it, because there must be permission from the condo board in order to do anything on the common grounds, like dig for a cable. And it's not going to be possible to do that probably after the road is redone, although Comcast will do it when it needs to, well, whatever we think. And I would suggest that the town work to help Concord Green pay for the conduit, because we're going to need to put conduit for electrical service in anyway. And the two piggyback together are going to need to be done in the foreseeable future. There'll be right to charge laws that will require owners to be able to charge electric vehicles. There's already places in the country that have passed them. And since there's going to be a need for updated electrical conduit already in Concord Green, can we not at least work together to get the conduit to the buildings for the fiber as well? And then charge anybody who wants to get it an extra fee to help pay for that, say, on top of the standard connectivity fee that everyone else is charged. Also, I'd be happy to show you my Comcast bill, which, like Gordon says, goes up and down. Comcast gives you a triple play discount that lasts for a year or 2 years, depending, and then it starts to sneak the cost up so that you don't notice it. And eventually it's, $50 to $100 more than you had been paying. And the only way to get it, and the only way to get Comcast to come down is to threaten to leave. Mm-hmm. There's a different group called the Keep the Customer With Us group that has different pricing they can offer you than the regular customer where you go to customer service pricing when you go to renew. I know because I switched one of my cable boxes and got a different remote and stopped my phone service because I don't need a landline anymore. And it would have increased my cost, but I have to go through to drop the phone. Mm-hmm. Got to go through the retention office instead.
Yeah, I feel like saying one of the policies that Concord Light Broadband has always pursued is this notion that the prices don't change and everybody pays the same.
And it's transparent, which is not how Comcast is.
It's precisely because of the obvious frustration that people have with their bills changing. And frankly, it was a decision that was made also because if you're trying to run lean on customer support staff, you don't really want to be paying people to sit there all day long and have difficult conversations with customers who don't like the way their bill is changing all the time. And so it was less expensive to operate that way as well, not to mention
I get the impression that the Concord Broadband isn't as reliable as Comcast. But how do I really know? Because Concord Broadband is completely transparent when there's an outage. Right. And with Comcast, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And
by the way,
small outages that are, just to me, for instance, or, and that's never shown.
I have a few comments real quick. So turns out I have Concord Broadband, but my disabled daughter, who calls me at a moment's notice if her Ethernet web is not working. And I can say, just based on that anecdotal information, that they're running neck and neck. Both of them go through short-term downtimes. I think you guys are all probably more aware of Concord Broadband's downtimes, and I've seen them even in the last week or so. I've seen gaps here and there because unfortunately I'm on it so much. Comcast, same story. There, by the way, if you were looking for a technology recommendation, and I guarantee you Comcast has this capability, they ping each user box probably at least no less than once a minute, and know the status and know when boxes can't be reached. And it would be possible to do that with any endpoint, either in Concord Broadband or otherwise. There's something else, Pamela, that you mentioned that I just feel like I want to comment about, which is it's the way you talk about the cost related to the community area that you're within. You actually made a decision when you bought a property within a community like that to defray your external costs and aggregate them and share them. So that was a decision you made, and that included any right of way for utilities, including broadband. So I don't want to be difficult about this, but I would point out that there is a decision that was made by virtue of you buying in a community like that you have to live with that community homeowners association and the rules therein. And I'm sure you had to sign that agreement.
Yes.
When you purchased the property. And so in some respects, that's something you've already signed up for.
Well, but when Concord Green was built, they didn't have Concord, the broadband cable.
And so one could argue that you should have saw that possibility and negotiated that. And good luck if you could have tried to negotiate it, because I'm doubted if you could have changed the negotiation. But that is, I mean, I'm in business and I run into this all the time. Circumstances change, and you can say, well, we didn't think about that, and the opposing party will always pretty much say tough luck,
Oh, I agree with that, but I got it in 2010. I came here. Okay. The fiber optic nodes are there. I am not allowed to pay to have it run to my building.
Yeah, well, that's between you and the homeowners association now.
Yeah, I'm going to point out, though, I don't know how many people remember when Peggy Brace came to town meeting with what she called the right to dry.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember that? I'm seeing some smiles. That was an initiative that had sustainability at its core, but she was essentially arguing for the right of anyone anywhere in town to put up a clothesline and dry their laundry in the free sunshine and air that is outdoors. And that was an instance where it was recognized that there were some premises around town that had restrictive covenants that didn't allow people to erect clotheslines because they were considered, for aesthetics or whatever the reasons were. And so town meeting actually took action to override that. So not saying that that's necessarily, it's slightly analogous, and you referenced the right to charge, and I referenced earlier in this meeting that some of the bylaws that have come up in places like Cambridge and Somerville that attempt to ensure that tenants have choice in terms of who they deal with. So it's not without precedent, and I think it raises a good point. Doesn't necessarily guarantee that choice will become available, but it moves in the direction of prohibiting it from being unavailable.
That that's basically the idea that I was talking about,
Yeah.
that there could actually be some additional authority.
Right. And so it's fair that I think we should at least consider whether or not there's a path down, that way that might help some of these, because it is the residents in the end. I mean,
Yeah.
and there's plenty of law, rent control, you could argue, is something similar. It essentially favors the rights of the residential owner, the residential residents of a property over the owner of the property for some reason. So thank you for
Also
that
in
comment.
Concord, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Also in Concord, Concord Green is essentially affordable housing generally, as housing goes in Concord. So there are many people, I'm not one of them, that find that Concord Green is one of the only places they can afford to live here. There is some equity inclusion
Mhm.
aspects to making sure that town services like broadband.
Yeah, and
charging.
that's actually, that interestingly enough, brings us back to this Comcast Internet Essentials, because if someone's meeting the circuit breaker requirements for low income, also meets the requirements for as you may know, that the town of Concord has relief for property owners that are relatively low income that own a property. There's mechanisms that allow them to defer or reduce their property taxes, which of course keep going up. And right now broadband has no answer to the Internet Essentials. There's no way we can get anywhere near $10.
Well,
And maybe we should, I don't know if that's a policy or relates to our work, but that's.
it's certainly one of the ones we could consider. So if there are no further public comments,
Sorry.
just try to bring it on home here.
As long as it ends up in the report.
Yeah.
I moved to adjourn.
Okay.
Typing
I
like
second
crazy, I gotta admit. So,
Yeah.
so who moved for
I did, Scott.
David?
David moved to adjourn. Any second for that?
I second it.
Gordon, thank you. Any further discussion about whether we've had enough for tonight? And I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. Happy New Year to all of you.
You
Thank
roll
you
call?
for the first meeting. Gordon, did you have a
Have to
comment?
do the roll call.
You have the roll call.
Oh,
Mark,
okay. I was just gonna suggest, I'm really intrigued by that first category of no connection from the right of way to the
Mhm.
neighborhood. I don't really want to have a meeting on the road, though we could do that. Just jump in a car with Zoom and actually drive around and take a look. But
Yeah.
anyway, Mark, would you be interested in maybe meeting me at a place where I unfortunately 3 of us can't do it, but 2 of us can, or we could have a mobile meeting.
Yeah. I'm happy to make the offer to, sort of give the publicly accessible sort of tour of Concord broadband to any member of the committee that wants more information about that. So if you want to do that, we can mask up and drive around in my electric vehicle, and I'll show you. around.
Charge it up, Mark. It's cold.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Having said that, I had a motion to adjourn from David and a second from Gordon, and I'll do a roll call. Gordon Brockway.
Aye.
You think I'd know this order by now? Scott Hopkinson,
aye.
David Hess,
I
Gail Heyer,
Hi.
and myself, Mark Howell. Have a great week.
thank you.
Thanks, people.
We'll see you
Scott,
next.
before you sign off.
Yep.
Did your daughter have red hair?
Yes, she does.
Did you used to come in my store with her?
Every chance we could.
Now I recognize you. It's taken me only like 3 months.
Yeah, no, my daughter is semi-infamous in town. She's
How's
yeah,
she doing?
great.
was-
She lives
was-
over in West Concord and at 70 Barrel Harold Street now.
She was a young little girl when I first was
Well,
introduced.
well, yeah, she's developmentally delayed. She will always need to live with a
Uh-huh.
caregiver, and she doesn't appear to be anywhere near her real age. She's
How
like
old is she
28.
now? She's
She's
28.
28, but she looks to be maybe 12 or 10.
But she was also always very sweet.
Oh, she's extremely sweet. Yeah.
Now I've looked at you for ages on these, and I think I recognize you, but I just didn't place it until you talked about your daughter.
Yeah. She
You're
called
my
me
best.
5 times during this meeting.
It happens. You're always so father.
Oh, I'm
Right.
still Mr. IT.
Take care.
All right. Take care.
Have a
Bye.
good night.